Views on this program are opinions of dental industry experts and not necessarily those of dentist advisors. Opinions shared in the following interview do not constitute personal financial advice. This program is furnished by Dentist Advisors, a registered investment advisor. This is Dentist Money. Now, here's your host, Reese Harper.
Welcome to the Dentist Money Show. We are here in Boston with someone that I met and was impressed with, Nancy Kagan. And I want her to introduce herself today because we had some interesting insights come from one of her colleagues recently, and I was really impressed with how many detailed questions that they were able to answer and just the insight that they brought. Nancy is a practice management expert and has an interesting background that I think applies to not only dentists but to hygienists and other members of the practice. So Nancy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Again, thanks for coming on. It's great to have you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. So my name is Nancy Kagan. My company is Summit Dental Partners, and we are practice management consultants. This is my 12th year having my own company, but I have a long career in dentistry. Started out as a hygienist, had a short career in hygiene, and about 4 years after graduation started a company called Dental Temporaries, and I did staffing for dental offices for many years.
Wow.
As a hygienist back then, and it was a while ago, there was no vehicle if you needed time off unexpectedly and you had a schedule full of patients. There really weren't many options. Excuse me. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I could get a temp? And thought, well, wonder what that would involve. And Dental Temporaries was born.
That's
so
cool.
I did that for 8 years, and I sold Dental Temporaries when an opportunity presented itself for me to manage a dental practice that was under construction.
Okay.
And I thought it was a great opportunity. I didn't know anything about managing a dental office, so I sold Dental Temporaries, and I started my management career.
Okay.
And over the next 25 plus years, I managed two practices. The first practice was sold, and I was transitioned, and they didn't need me in the same capacity. The second practice, the partnership dissolved. So I found myself kind of out of work through no fault of my own for the second time, and I thought, well, I know a lot of people and I feel like I know how to run a successful practice.
Let's give it a go.
Let's see what I can do on my own.
The entrepreneurial journey began. That's a scary jump.
Yeah,
but,
it was like jumping off a cliff without a net, but I had to trust that I could make it work.
Sometimes that's where the best things are born from, all the pressure, that you have to kind of go through to make something cool happen.
That's exactly right.
So can you say the name of your company one more time? I'm only asking you because I want you to say partners with the way that I cannot say it.
Oh, no, you're setting me up here. Okay. I don't know. It's Summit Dental Partners. How'd I do?
It's awesome.
I want people to make sure they remember that we're coming from Boston.
Yeah,
I got to make that clear.
Okay, this is a Boston interview. That's awesome. Okay, so let's jump into a little bit of a question I like to ask, which is, talk to me about, from your perspective, the biggest mistakes that you see, or the biggest mistake in practice management that you feel like is something that you've really been able to glean over the years of experience you've had.
Hard to kind of pare it down, and they all kind of touch each other, but I'll do my best. I think the thing that's hardest for us is the issue of kind of the staff actually knowing more than the doctor. So there's kind of a blind faith sometimes put in dental staff because there's no business training in dental school, or minimal at best. So, dentists buy practices, and then they either acquire a staff or they hire a staff who have, experience, usually more than the doctor. So there's a lot of guessing, and that's something we say. We don't want anyone to guess.
Guessing on both parts, or guessing on the part of the staff, guessing on the part of the dentist?
Usually guessing on the part, what I'm referring to is guessing on the part of the dentist to say, oh, no, I'm pretty sure that we do a good job with that. Or
a lot of perception.
Yes, that's right. But nothing to back it up. So we say, pretty sure, or she's always on the phone, or I think she's working hard. Those aren't measurable metrics for me. And I say you can't build your business on a foundation of guessing. It has to be on something solid. And that's certainly the model that I've chosen to follow in helping
so
our
you'd
dental
say
offices.
There's kind of a separation between the doctor and his daily duties,
right,
and what happens at the front.
That's right, the management of the business.
And that is something that's common.
Very common. And sometimes when you're working in your business, you don't have a lot of time to work on your business, so therefore you're letting someone else, or you're making assumptions that someone else is working on your business. And if you don't have the knowledge base to know that, accounts receivable is 3 times what it should be, if your bills are getting paid, you think, well, everything must be okay.
Totally.
And we're saying that that's the guessing that we try not to.
I really like that concept. In fact, in our practice, I find that financial knowledge especially is an area where no one had a business class, no one had any kind of financial training. So when it comes to like numbers and quantifying data and metrics, that's really kind of a subject area that a lot of dentists are uncomfortable with.
Correct.
It's an intimidating subject for a lot of them because they haven't had any undergrad. They're usually a bio undergrad, or there's some kind of more of a science-based field or an arts field even, and so that analytics kind of side of the left brain side is usually not as strong, or there's not an interest level there. But it's so crucial in order to run a business, right? I mean, half of their livelihood really is probably going to be based on whether the practice itself is functioning well, not just their clinical skill.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, we hear all the time people say, I really just want to work on my patients, and I say, but you bought a business.
Yeah.
So the problem is a disconnect there. So I get why they look at resumes, or they talk to people who talk the talk, and they think, okay, I've got myself covered because I have Mary here or Susie here, or whatever, working on the administration. I'm saying unless you have measurable metrics, then you're guessing about Mary's, ability to do the job.
But this is and one question I kind of had as you were saying that is, I see a lot of pressure that these dentists feel to give up that side of their life, right? They sell to a larger group, they are acquired, they just give up this role, and there's a lot of, in some cases, that might be an appropriate decision. Our audience tends to be this independent entrepreneurial dentist that wants to still maintain control and have the upside of that endeavor. And so I don't want to speak to anyone. This is kind of a comment to those people who are still trying to maintain their independence. But do you see, what do you see like in your experience what is the upside that people have by maintaining independence, versus joining a large group and just saying, I don't want to deal with the business stuff, As a consultant, do you see that people are faced with that question a lot, and how do you advise them, or what do you tell them about that choice?
Right. Well, I think there's a mindset that everybody has to own a practice. I do some speaking at the dental school, and I'll have an audience of students, and I'll say, how many of you are working on the assumption that you'll ultimately own your own practice? And every hand goes up.
Really?
Nobody's saying, no, not for me. I don't like the business. I just want to treat my patients. It's not being said prior to the purchase. It's generally being said when they see what's involved with the ownership, and they say, now I really want to be a little bit more hands-off.
Yeah.
And we feel... we feel like it's important that our practice docs are educated, at least with what they need to know to make sure that that they're keeping an eye on business.
Yeah, I agree. Talk to me a little bit about some of the maybe a solution or implementation that a doctor can do to really make a big difference day to day. What's your paradigm on that?
Well, we're all about responsibility and accountability. We talk about that a lot. So in hand with that is written systems that all have an accountability measure and that are managed by a well-trained staff. So we don't want to say, what do you do for recall? And someone say, oh, I don't really know. Mary takes care of that. I want everybody to know what Mary does for recall.
What recall is.
What it is. What is she? How is she keeping patients in the hygiene schedule? How often is she reaching out to them? What manner is she reaching? Is she emailing? Is she texting? Is she sending postcards? I want all that to be written, so there's no question what Mary is doing for recall, and I want to know if it's working. The most important thing for us is it working? Does the data support that we got the system right? It's not science to us, practice management. It's kind of trial and error based on the demographic and the philosophy of the practice.
So talk to me about how you would break down a practice if you were trying to surgically cut it apart into departments and say, these are the systems I'm analyzing. How do you view that?
You mean
from your perspective?
Right. Well,
yeah.
we
if you're going to grade a practice and kind of cut it apart into
right.
segments,
yeah,
how do you look at it?
We look at everything.
Okay.
I mean, our engagement with all of our practices starts with an 8-hour visit.
Okay.
I need to watch, look, and listen. So I need to.
I think I tell me about some of these departments that you'd kind of look at and in a way that the dentist might be able to relate to.
Okay. Well, we're looking at kind of the patient flow. We're looking at the information that's gathered prior to the patient's visit. How proactive is the practice? How ready for the patient is the practice? How does the practice hand off from the front, the administrative area to the clinical area? How does treatment get transferred from the clinical area back to the front? How are co-payments collected? So that's all we're looking for on the administrative end. And then we're looking at the hygiene department. Is it hitting industry metrics? Is it in line with what the standards should be? And if not, why not? We're looking at procedures that are performed, percentages of production to the whole. We're looking at all of that.
So how do financials come into play on that versus looking at production metrics? And how do you guys dive into financials a little bit? I know they're the same thing, but sometimes there's some discrepancies, right? I'll go in and talk to one of my clients, and he'll say, I'm producing $120,000 every month, and his bank deposits are, $70,000, or his bank deposits are $140,000. And sometimes the way they code things, the way they're keeping track of things in Dentrix or EagleSoft doesn't really correlate with their.
Right.
Is it easy for a consultant to kind of reconcile the financial and the deposits with the practice management software, and is that easy to kind of analyze?
Certainly if we have access, but everything has to tie out. Everything has to make sense. So if it's collected in your dental software, it has to be deposited in the bank.
Yeah.
I mean, barring some unusual exceptions where maybe a vendor is giving you some sort of a stipend for purchasing that goes into the bank that isn't in it. Right? But it should all make sense every month. It should be the dental software should tie out with the accounting software, which should tie out with a bank statement. And that's where you have to be mindful, because that's where things happen that shouldn't. If it doesn't tie out, there's got to be a reason.
Yeah, what are kind of the maybe one or two things that just don't smell right when you're trying to find embezzlement or theft or fraud? What's one or two things that just doesn't smell right, to you? What do you look for?
Well, we're always looking at the adjustments. First of all, the math has to make sense. So if you're collecting 80% of what you produce, you should be adjusting 20%. If those numbers don't make sense, something is off. So if you're collecting 80% and adjusting off 10%, where's the other 10% to bring you to your gross production? So those numbers have to make sense. The percentages have to make sense. That's one of the things we look at, but we're always looking at adjustments. Adjustments have to be categorized correctly so that you can look at them every day and know someone made a decision that that's money you're not going to collect. So it has to make sense. So if there's, we see it all the time, unfortunately, sadly, and we'll see an adjustment. Just recently, someone made a big adjustment on a family member's ortho and wrote it off because she knew the doctor never looked at the reports. She never printed reports every day. Nobody looked at the reports, so she adjusted off the ortho, and it shouldn't have happened. So that's where we really see a lot of the impropriety happen is in that space.
Seems like it's more common, like in my experience at least, I've just been surprised that in dentistry compared to other industries that I'm pretty familiar with seems to have a much higher percentage of practices affected by embezzlement or fraud than other industries. It just seems like there's a lot happening at the front, would you say that that's the case? Is there more embezzlement and fraud happening in dentistry than in other industries, or not really?
Yeah, well, I may not know about other industries, but it goes back to my kind of original thought, is someone's at the front desk, they're aware that they have a doc who doesn't really know how to make sense of the numbers, that doesn't look at reports on a regular basis. So if a patient comes in and makes a cash payment for a co-payment, and they just put in an adjustment and call it a professional courtesy, they can put that money in their pocket. So the problem is there's a lot of blind faith, and there's no checks and balances. I mean, for us, it's all about checks and balances, and if there aren't any, and you have someone there who has an inclination, or, listen, we see it happen where really good employees hit hard times. We see it happen with prescription fraud. We see it happen with patient employees running their personal credit card through the office machine and putting credits on them. We see that a lot. So because they know nobody's looking at the credit card statement when it comes in to match it to the actual transactions. So it's really all about the oversight.
There's a lot happening there that needs to have some oversight.
Right. And, for us, we certainly understand how hard it is to do the oversight, especially it's a space that you don't choose. You didn't go to business school. You went to dental school. We get that. And we try to fill the void, of course, as best we can.
Do you think people are hesitant and we did a podcast on this about outsourcing and how dentists they're hesitant to outsource things. They're hesitant to let other people into their lives to help them. I think they've been taken advantage of in some cases, or maybe their lack of experience in business makes them feel like they can do more. They can keep more on their own plate. Right. They did really well in school. They've excelled in a lot of ways, but sometimes they might hold on to tasks or jobs that they aren't qualified to do. Do you see that happening where people are hesitant to really let go of some of these, to bring someone else in, a consultant, someone to help and say, help me with this? And why do you think they're hesitant to do that in a lot of cases?
Part of it is probably outsourcing costs. I'm sure that
they don't want to spend money. It's one. Cost
is one. I think, I think people are a little bit afraid of what people are going to find. Like I know something isn't right, but I'm really nervous about what you might find. So I might just let it go another week, and it becomes a month, and it becomes 6 months, even though they know they really need some intervention or somebody to come in with a fresh pair of eyes. And I think there's just almost like a fear of because if you find something, I'll have to do something.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
And they're busy
right.
Yeah.
Like if I don't, we fondly use the word ostriches, and we say, sometimes you have to pull your head out and you have to see what you have to see.
Yeah. That's good insight. Well, if you could leave everybody with kind of a main takeaway today, in practice management, something that you'd say, I'd like people to remember this, what would you kind of leave with people?
Well, I think there are kind of two thoughts. One is make sure that you have the right team. Make sure that everybody that's on the bus, you want them on the bus, make sure they're in the right seat, and make sure everybody is facing and going in the same direction. So that's key. At the root of it is the team. And I think the other thing I might say is you can't change what you don't measure. So just because you don't measure it doesn't mean it's okay. It just means that you're not looking. So you have to be able to measure things in order to make change.
I think that's really good insight. I really like that second comment and the first one too. I think it's crucial for people to have the right team in place, and sometimes they're hesitant to let go of a family member, a friend, someone they've had around for a long time, someone that we've seen in a lot of cases where people happen to be they're overcompensating someone, like double maybe what they should get paid, and it's just hard to have that hard conversation. But it really is. It's important for the health of your patients, for the health of your family and your practice. You've got to make some of those hard decisions and get the right team in place.
Without question.
Yeah.
Can't do it without the right team.
The other thing you said is to stick with make sure that you do things by numbers and data.
Correct. Let the data speak.
Don't make it be emotional, and I think that's just really good advice. It's super insightful. Well, thanks for taking the time. Again, this is the Dentist Money Show here with Nancy Kagan, and thanks so much, Nancy.
All right,
it's been a
thank you.
pleasure.
My pleasure.